Okay. Links Ave, transitional arrangements.
I've got Karen here to talk about that. Just by way of introduction, we've obviously had some significant safety concerns around the operation of Links Ave since I think it was late 2018, early 2019. We had about mid-2019, we had the first community representation in chambers about the unsafe environment, particularly for children. We threw everything but or even the kitchen sink at it to try and implement some changes, some of which didn't land all that well with some of the stakeholders. We are trying to fit a multitude of objectives into this narrow corridor, and ultimately a community liaison or advisory group was established in mid-22, and this paper concludes the work that we've done with them and the implementation aspects that we have landed on in terms of the physical operation of the corridor. So I'll hand over to Karen with that introduction.
Thank you, Nick. And on that note, I would formally like to acknowledge the Links Ave panel. They have tested us, challenged us, and worked with us to achieve some great outcomes, really passionately for the Links Avenue themselves and the wider community. This, as Nick indicated, is the last phase for implementation of transitional improvements. So it's noting that a business case needs to be wrapped around it for some future and permanent change. We couldn't, unfortunately, deliver all the aspirations as we would have liked. The impacts on the community at this, for example, removing all the parking on Links Ave is not appropriate at this time. So that said, this is the last phase that includes improvements outside of the school, enhancing the safety of the current cycle facilities, following feedback from local students and some of the challenges they face. And importantly, the next step is to reevaluate the operation of the cul-de-sac following the opening of B2B. So that opened in December. We've needed to wait for traffic to normalise, so we'll be doing that assessment as we speak through to March, and also look at new opportunities, which will be quite unique for Tauranga, at looking at potential exemptions for residents, where some have some real challenges in accessing local amenities, going to the doctor, having their friends visit. So we hear that loud and clear. So we'll be looking at what options might exist within a very constrained legal framework that we work within. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Karen. And can we also, first of all, acknowledge the panel and the work that the panel have done? And we really appreciate it because it hasn't been easy for them. And they're just ordinary residents who care about their community, and they've had to grapple with NZTA rules, safety rules, outside people, and the systems and processes of local government. So we really appreciate the work that they've done. But I think we also need to acknowledge you, because I think you came and brought into that process a real willingness to work alongside the community. And we had many comments from them that your can-do attitude made a big difference to them. And they felt that you were listening to them and trying to do the best for them in a very difficult circumstance. So thank you for that work. And I think, so thank you, and to the panel. I have a question around the B2B, and it was part of the frustration of trying to drive into the city last night, because B2B still hasn't finished. And I was routed all over the city to try and get from the east to Ngātua last night. So big sections closed. The roundabout there at Bayfair was closed. We were rerouted down, very tempted to go down Links Ave. But so I'm just a bit worried that we are testing that normalisation maybe a bit too soon, because we're not there yet. And this is the second Sunday night in a row where traffic has been disrupted quite considerably. Had to go through Papamoa and out the back there.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Absolutely. I wasn't aware. So we'll definitely look at extending some of those evaluations to ensure we capture it today and a bit further along the line. But thank you.
I think it's worth just mentioning the cause of this, which the paper doesn't actually talk about, was triggered by the rerouting of the
I was coming to that.
from the B2B project, and I think it started in 2018 and then quickly ramped up and nearly within a number of months doubled the volume on Links Ave, and that's what generated the safety issues, particularly for school children on the footpaths, etc., where they had buses really close to them, and that was the primary concern of the parents at the time in the area. And then there's obviously been delay after delay in completing the project. And I guess we're in that position of another one here where we had understood that it was going to be back to normal and the State Highway traffic would return to State Highway 2. And you're right, that hasn't happened yet. So it's something we're keeping an eye on. And of course, we can't make the final decision on it until we see that normalisation.
Right.
Yeah,
that's right. But actually, I mean, and you're right. And I was going to raise, where we started, where we picked it up, but actually it goes back further than that. And that's, I think, for the council, we need to be very careful. And I think that's some of the concerns through the TSP, that governance needs to be over the top of some of that planning, because at some stage, Links Ave was determined as the bus route and the cycle route, and 200 buses a day go through that street. That's a residential street. And, it beggars belief for me that would have been part of the planning without talking to the community, without thinking, because then the bus lane goes in and then we develop the safety. So right back at the stage when you're planning the routes, to think that you're going to send, at the moment, 200 buses, if public transport over the next 10 to 15 to 20 years increases, how many buses will be going down a residential street with a school and children going to and from not only that school, but the school, 2 other schools in close proximity. So it's even an earlier look and think about where those routes are. And that was the biggest complaint from the residents that we heard constantly, was that the buses used to go down the state highway. And that's where they should be, in that sort of numbers. Because then we had and then they've still got the layover in Lysander Street, which is another residential street that has something like 50 buses idling at any, through the day outside residential homes. So if you go right back to the planning of this, it is appalling, actually. And did governance have a look at it? Did the council and the regional councillors look at the effects of that on people when that was planned? The answer's probably no.
Well, I think this goes back to a public transport blueprint process that was undertaken by the regional council in conjunction with our staff in Wakakatahi back in 16 or 17. I think governance probably was disconnected to that, although at some stage they did receive, endorse and support the blueprint, not necessarily understanding, I think, the full ramifications of the impact on the community. And of course, you know what happened thereafter, trying to establish bus terminals and Farm Street so I think the disconnect or the understanding of the ramifications of those types of decisions probably weren't fully understood or appreciated by the council of the day. And since the other issue is that the state highway, Monganui Road there, where the B2B, it was determined that that wasn't suitable for a major bus terminal and or site, but in hindsight, arguably, as part of designs, it could well have been considered.
Yeah. So I mean, I had to make that point because that's what we've heard from residents. Farm Street and Links Ave have severely changed what happens in residential streets. Okay. Shad.
Thanks, Karen, for the report, and support the comments, particularly to the panel. Giving up their time to engage with us and on behalf of the community to work through these issues, challenging issues. Just looking at these transitional changes that have been proposed, and understand that we went out and we engaged with the community, particularly those that live in around Links Ave, 700 initiations for contact, and then we got about 17 responses or something to that effect. I suppose I'm just wanting some clarity or some reassurance that, as we initiate these transitional changes, that we continue the conversation. I know that we can, through the transitional process, we can adjust things as we go to accommodate people's issues and concerns. But just wanting to make sure that we've got a clear line of sight in terms of our engagement with community through that process.
Absolutely. Part of the transitional change is to test and what that looks like and receive further feedback from the community. And I think it's really important prior to a full business case process and how that gets funded into the future, given government priorities, that we really look to harness some of those low-cost interventions and support some of the challenges for that community that they face. So while the panel has retired, we still keep in contact with them, keep them updated, and plan to do the same with the residents and the wider community.
Thank you. I totally agree with the sentiments. My question's about you've done a good job, I think, in minimising the number of in-lane bus stops, but there's 1 out of the 9 that you've managed to. What, if anything, can be done about that?
Through you, the Chair, Commissioners, it is an incredibly challenging situation to address. It's on the Gulf Road intersection, so we've moved it further down where further width is allowed for vehicles to pass. But a lot of the students, because the footpath is so congested, is coming around from Gulf Road off the footpath and going into the live traffic lane. The buses don't see them. It is a really challenging bit of road. So to address that, we're bringing the cycle lane on the inside of the lane and the bus stop, but also move the bus lane a little bit further down. So when it's safe to pass, there's better sufficient space for vehicles to do that. It's not ideal. Can't give them absolute traffic lane, but it is the best we can do, unfortunately, within the constraints.
But I guess that's one of the issues that can be tested as the transition is put in place.
Anything else? No. Bill's happy to move. We just received the report and endorse the improvements phase 3 for implementation. You happy to second? Okay, any further discussion? All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. Thanks, Karen.